Hello and welcome to a very special session as part of our introduction to AI, new AI design practices. This is the first time we've had such a session, and it's really because of the fact that we've got some really interesting new practices emerging right now that are part of a new wave, I think, of such practices. We have Mariana Cabuchero. I'm delighted to have her with her, who is the CEO of MC Studio. We have Tim Fu, who is the CEO of Studio Tim Fu, and we also have Marina Knežević, who is working for Gensler. So we have a two-part session in some sense. We're having Mariana and Tim Fu together, and then we'll be looking at these new design practices. And then Lorena going straight on afterwards, and we'll be talking about how existing practices are going to are trying to adapt to this new world of AI. Well, one thing about today is that it's very clear that these design practices are super busy. It's a Saturday, and Mariana and Tim are juggling this between meetings. So let's get straight onto it. And let me just go through some of these slides just to go and show you what we're going to be dealing with. Some images from Mariana's office. Very exciting work coming out of Dubai. Tim Fu also doing some extraordinary sort of work. We'll find out more about this, and then finally Lorena will be talking about how existing practices are adapting. So let me stop sharing and invite Mariana to share her screen.
Sure thing.
Lorena,
Good to see you,
welcome.
Neil.
Yeah.
Always good times. Lorena and Tim, good to see you too. Let's power this through very quickly. All right, let me just make sure that everything is sound is sharing. I'm gonna optimize this for video as well. I think it should be all good. And let's do it, guys. Happy Saturday. It's gonna be a quick one, I think, from most of us today. It is Saturday also. We want you to enjoy your Saturday. So I'm gonna show you for a quick 20 minutes how we are integrating AI, what's our stance in AI, how can this help you mainly. So I actually did this presentation for today, and it was crafted just for you to have an idea of how can you take advantage of this, what should be your stance, and how would this be part of your workflow as a student, as a professional, or as an employer, obviously, or a business owner. So in our case, MC Studios, we believe in human craft empowered by AI. AI has been heavily integrated in everything that we want automated, and everything we don't want automated, we do it ourselves, which is also something that I learned in the past massively in my experience. That's why I never wanted to actually put it away, and I became good at it as well. So it would be a shame to put away the skills of craftsmanship in architecture. A little bit about me, for someone who do not know me, I'm Marina Cabuchero. I'm from Portugal. I moved to London 10 years ago. Happy place, in tough as well. I moved to learn design research laboratory. I had already a master's in architecture. I did a second master's in London, joined Zaha Hadid, stayed at Zaha Hadid for 6 years as senior architectural designer. And during that time, I worked on two projects that for me are the ones that I have close to my heart since I designed them from the beginning with my team. And then I followed to later stages, Navi Mumbai and Tower C. Most of my craftsmanship skills came from Zaha. That was my school of 3D modeling in Autodesk Maya, as most of you know. And then I joined World as architect director for Web3 design, metaverse in that case. A year later, I decided that it was time to actually open my own studio, pick up on my practices and my knowledge from physical build, which has some similarities to the digital build from World. And then that gave me what I found to be a good ground to start my own studio.
Permission for landing.
The sound. So the studio is known to be an hybrid practice of architecture. It's something that I have been saying from the beginning. I do physical, we do digital too. It's important to have a foot on the digital space. It's a foot that I want to be much stronger. Unfortunately, I'm more on the physical right now because you need to get your clients and get your finances, and the physical is more obvious for an architect. The virtual environment is the one that I'm, pushing myself through. The studio is hybrid. Sometimes we are 15, sometimes we are 3. Depends on the project. So this team that you're looking at was a team that worked for the airport project. It was a very big project for Saudi that we have submitted in concept stage, virtual and physical build. And basically, like I mentioned, we do physical. On one side, it was Saudi Arabia. This is one of the projects that made the most headlines from virtual and physical. We do integration in VR. This is something that I know is not so relevant today on the topic of AI, but it's something that I really recommended to do. Live rendering engine, Unreal Engine, something that I learned, that I teach to all my students, and everyone who works in this studio right now knows how to run a Unreal Engine. That's very important for me. And then AI visualization strategy partner, and this is what we are going to be talking today a little bit more. Clients and most of the people we are working on the other side of the continent. So South America, heavily in Brazil right now, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, heavy too. India is our biggest client for later stage design. The Philippines for AI, south of Spain for AI, Switzerland for AI, Mexico for AI, and then one for Las Vegas, which is going to be built. Okay, so what does it mean, human craft empowered by AI? If you follow us, MC Studios, you know that my social media team insists a lot in mentioning that we are 90% human craft, 10% AI. So what does this mean for you? How can you apply that if you believe in that ratio? And how do we do it at MC Studios? What does it mean? Apart from the fact that we know that AI is much older than the last 5 years that we have seen a mainstream, automation has been heavily speeding up industries such as fashion, product design, and that's why you see a lot of numbers and a lot of clothes in the ocean as well. We pushed for quantity, we pushed for automation, we pushed for speed. That does not mean that we push for quality, but it means that we pushed for variety and for obviously very valuable terms, which is speed and quantity. We all need that as well. And then some of the other industries resisted a little bit. For example, haute couture, human craft, tailored, and quality stayed a little bit on the side in parallel, right? And how does this apply in architecture? Automation versus human craft. The most common take that you'll see on workflows when AI started was the full control of AI or artificial intelligence or any automation tools, right? On pre-concept, on concept, on post-production, and some of them in 3D. And this is when it is 100% automation. This is a typical workflow these days when you are learning AI. But then when it comes to architecture and when you start doing later stages, your client will always ask for the 3D, unfortunately, but fortunately too. And when you start doing the 3D, you completely disregard AI, right? Unless you're staying in the concept. But when you start doing SD, schematic design, or DD, AI becomes extremely obsolete and unfit for those phases for now. So what happens on the second traditional take on AI is AI for pre-concept, AI for concept. And then when you start to do Rhino, you start to do BIM or any rationalization of 3D modeling or panelization, AI goes to a corner, you go to human craft, and then human craft for post-production, which is rendering, okay, which finally now changed. And this was the second most common take. So this was the take that in the studio, we were struggling a lot with the fact before that we couldn't do a full circle in the studio of automation pre-concept, concept by form finding, human craft, and then to close the cycle with post-production rendering with AI. This was a struggling that in the studio we kept pushing and pushing. I think you've seen some of our projects, some of the renders were not there yet, but we wanted to close the cycle. And finally, this happened in the last year. The last half a year. We start with pre-concept in automation. We've seen that largely on Instagram, these obsessive candy images of AI on Instagram. We start on pre-concept. My team takes it up and goes fully 3D very quickly. Okay, let's say pre-concept takes a day, 2 days, fully 3D for a whole week. That means form finding, that means later stages for Rhino, that means BIM. We outsource our BIM actually right now. And then we finally close the cycle with AI rendering on AI retexturing from 3D, right now much more powerful in Nano Banana Gemini and Midjourney. And then we go to video with AI renders, which is also very useful for kind of smaller formats of video too. So this comes with the fact that on the project, some of the projects we have done, one very specific for India, we actually had to deliver BIM, we had to deliver DD stages, and that meant that AI was completely, totally put to the side. So this is the kind of phase deliverables that we have been involved, and AI became actually a very small chapter, almost irrelevant in the whole process, which is not great because it does help us speeding up and create quantity specifically. So how does it look like this 90% human, 10% AI? We start, sometimes we handcraft, sometimes we actually start with the pre-concept with AI. Quickly, we go to Maya. So the screenshots that you see here, this is the process we used for the airport in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. Quickly, the process that you see there goes to Maya. So what you see there is screenshots from Maya, from mesh modeling. No one is doing AI anymore at some point, like that stops. This is Maya on the right side from the airport views. And then that takes us to Rhino. In this case, we did have to submit a geometry that is a little bit more rationalized in Rhino. And then not for the case of the Saudi Arabia airport, but for another case, we had to jump to Grasshopper and then from Grasshopper to AutoCAD, from AutoCAD to BIM, and then BIM to Revit. And this closes the whole process. So if you look at the AI intervention here, it is really, really small when it comes to what it can be and how much the studio actually wants it to be part of. What are the tools that we run here? And this is something that I show to everyone because I feel that for an architecture student, you should take a screenshot and kind of know what the tools are there. The main tools of our selection are weapons of choice, 3D modeling, Maya, Rhino, Grasshopper, artificial intelligence. These are the ones that we are running right now. I try to kill as many subscriptions we can, otherwise you'll have a gigantic list of AI subscriptions. BIM, AutoCAD, Revit, live rendering, 100% is the hill where we die on is Unreal Engine, MetaHuman, and Epic Games. And then VR and XR integration, we do a lot more Oculus, and then we integrate on pixel streaming platforms like AT-Level or Worlds. So how do we do 3D plus AI integration? And this is very specific, okay? This is something I wouldn't show to clients. I'll show to you, students, or people who want to integrate AI, how they do it. Two different chapters, post-production, marketing visuals. So if you remember the diagram I showed you, and the other one, pre-concept, right? Not the center, which is concept and form finding. Pre-concept, post-production, marketing visuals. And then our main stance. One, architects must lead AI integration, not AI leading AI, which one day will happen. For now, architects lead AI. AI can accelerate pre-concept designs and visual storytelling. We use AI to reduce time, improve design clarity, and boost marketing output. That's really important as well. And then past the pre-concept phase, we always control architecture in full 360 degrees. Okay. So on left side, pre-concept. From a hand sketch, I mean, I don't know, the client is not here. Obviously, this hand sketch was done after the design, okay? But let's say from the hand sketch of your clients, you did a beautiful 3D. This is Mohammed in the studio doing a master plan for Brazil, for Atuba. And then we finalized with post-production AI. Okay, so the bottom one, it's post-production. You can tell it was the beginning of a good retexturing. So it has a lot of mistakes, but you need to adapt to the speed of AI, obviously. So now we would do a lot better. And we are doing as well. And then concept, this is where we start modeling like a bit hardcore, every detail, specifically facade is a very common brief for Dubai, for example, facade design or dressing up their towers, it is very common. So we are dressing up towers basically with human craft. And then from that onwards, we start going to rendering from screenshots, which is the retexturing that I told you about. And then sales. Sales became something that we decided to do some time ago when Kaitan joined the studio. And it is basically providing videos to real estate, to developers. We do lifestyle, we do interiors, we do exteriors. And it's kind of a funny thing to see an architect doing that. And I never thought I'd be doing AI CGI in an architecture studio. But you know what? It's a snack bite that we all architects actually are good at. And it's been quite fun. And probably the most clients that we have right now, it's for AI CGI. Continue. Okay, so this is a little bit of our project from Brazil. It was a huge master plan. So screenshots are on top from Maya, and then the bottom is AI renders retexturing. So from human eye level or from master plan level. Master plan level has been quite hard to retexture. It's getting much better with Nano Banana, but with Midjourney was a nightmare. And then obviously we started playing a little bit with what generative AI can make for master planning. So coding exactly what's the program, the location, and how would this influence the shape of your master plan. This is very entertaining for your clients, but then when it comes to design, to be fair, we had an idea of the sketch already in mind. So this was just a play of program, a play of quantities mostly, but it's also something that they can do with Grasshopper. But it's fun to do it with AI to see how much it can go. Same here in this case. So we had 4 different villas or 4 different biomes that we call them. And they were luxury villas too. One was temporary, the other one is residential. And then the one that goes around is a hotel. It's a pretty cool project. And it was fun to test it with AI, right? It does die a little bit early. And this is if you like the retexture, this retexture is like old as hell, but at the same time it's not, right? It was at the beginning of my journey picking up on screenshots and rendering. And I'll show you some projects by the end of the presentation. You'll see the difference of how fast it evolved, the capacity to render with AI, render, right, retexture. These are some shots of the projects. And then, like I mentioned, the marketing visual sales that we do for developers. Sometimes we design, so this interior design was designed by us, which is good because, I mean, we are mostly architects, not a CGI company. And sometimes we actually pick up on their 3D and we just, issue some lifestyle from their renders. It's been quite common in south of Spain. Projects that we are working on that we can show because they were published just recently. There was a Marbella project. The final one is not here, so this is just the experiments. Until then, we call them the 500 facade generations. It was when Muhammad went crazy with the facade. I was not liking a lot in the beginning, and then I said, you know what, like generate as much facade as you can, but based on our crafts in Maya. And I know that this sounds weird if you're not a Maya designer, but if you are a Maya designer, when you look at the way we are generating, you can tell that there's a little bit of the technique that we do in 3D that inform the way we are generating, right? That's very important here. So he generated 500, and I went through them 500 in Midjourney, and I was like, this. And then after that, we picked the one that we know that in Maya would be quite quick to do, and obviously that the geometry is not very complex for building. And then from then onwards, usually you jump into lobby design. Most clients who ask for facade design, they also ask for lobby design. So we jump into AI generation. And that project stayed in concept is now in parallel happening for 3D model, which we haven't done yet. And then it comes one that is a recycled project for New York. Again, this was not for New York. This was a facade that we have done for another place. And we were able to collage, make a very quick recycle in another place of the world so we don't breach any confidentiality. And this was rendered for New York. If you look at it, you'll see the 3D model here. Oh my God, this is so loud. The 3D model on the right side, and that would take us to screenshots, and then directly from screenshots. Okay, so this is our process. We take the screenshots, we set up the cameras. So on the left side is Maya. You can tell him there. I think our final Maya had a little bit more detail, okay, but not excessive detail. And in this case, we did it with Nano Banana from Gemini. We agree on the cameras. The designers agree with me. We set up how many cameras we want, and then we start generating with AI in Nano Banana. And right now we are doing mostly Gemini. On top of it, we do as many iterations we need, and then I pick one, and then we start taking it to Magnific and so on and so on, and for post-production Photoshop too. Just for you to have an idea of speed, for us architects, each of them's generation will be a 5-minute generation, a 10-minute generation. So in the end, a final render, I consulted with Davide. I think he's on 15 minutes per good render. So this one on the left side, he said 15, 20, but he's also becoming very experienced on it, obviously. The more you do, the more experience you get in AI specifically. And then that generates a gigantic marketing package for you from exterior to interior, everything from 3D modeling. And then a bit of video, which I hope it also improves on quality, but we are pushing as much as we can from what they give us, right? And then obviously the Dubai Tower, which we were able to show a little bit today. Obviously the tower now looks a little bit different. This tower is a little bit old now. Again, same process. So from the 3D model, you generate the renders with some of them were Midjourney, some of them were already Nano Banana. And this is the 3D model. So this was in Maya. We developed most of the form finding from here. Actually, if you look at the facade, you see that we recycled a little bit of the first AI from Marbella Tower, right? Look at the flow of the details here. So that's a very clear example of a pre-concept that informs a post-production, right? A concept and then a post-production. So then post-production, all the renders, all the videos, like gigantic marketing package, all this that we see came from a 3D model and then from rendering. And then the last part of using AI, and that's a different chapter as an architect that you can take advantage of, is to actually produce the storytelling for it. So what is post-production with AI these days? And it could be either from architecture, and then the most beautiful side for me on AI is actually introducing lifestyle. So seamless integration of human figure in space. And this has been booming these days. So when we put a video online, we get a lot of people coming saying, can you do this video for us? And then I give that to my AI department, and they basically just generate CGI for other companies, developers, real estate. At some point, we were approached for weddings. That's why you see some of these scenarios, and all of them were just, just marketing packages. Go, go, go. Go. Okay, so like I mentioned, architecture, lifestyle, and then my favorite part, which is a bit less common, it's for XR, right? Magical places. VR, nature that is not realistic. This is something that we are doing for the Philippines, and it's one of my favorites. This was one of the storytelling that we are doing as well. For Dubai, it's online, but I think I'll show you the Omniat one. Very hard, very hard. So all this was fully AI generated, right? Every detail you see here. You be mindful that this is not what you get straight from your AI, right? I'm in here. I was the one who edited. I edited all the microseconds in which everything is perfect, but it's not that easy, right? Especially when you start seeing hands or buildings on the skyline, they get very messy. So you need to be very strategic on what to pick from your AI generation for post-production and videos, basically. But again, this is a very fast-moving industry. I'm pretty sure it'll just become easier and easier and more and more flawless. So this was the storytelling for Lumina Tower, which Omniat has been promoting quite a lot. So the renders were not originally done by us. We enhanced the renders quite massively. So in the center, you have the original one, and then everything else was AI enhancements and introduction of lifestyle, which is definitely the most important part for us. So everything here was a lifestyle that had a topic related to the actual tower, which was crystals, jewelry, detail. So in this case, we focus a lot on female figures, a bit older, luxurious. They are my favorites, kind of on the formal side, very well dressed. So all this was like lobby design, and then the top, all this became like AI generated for post-production storytelling. Oh, the sound is not playing now. But it's a good example on how to create these marketing videos for selling a project that doesn't cost, traditionally it would be 70K, right? These kind of videos. And now you can just streamline it yourself for much cheaper, much faster. I have to be transparent with you. There's a huge step and huge gap still to reach higher formats. So most of clients, I ask you for these videos to be in 20K resolution or 10K. And as much as you can upscale your videos, that does not mean that you can introduce more detail that actually behaves well in a 20K screen, right? So that has been quite challenging, and then we still need to see a lot from that. So that's basically what you see from us mostly is when we say 90% craft, I mean tailored and in quality and in team building and in team connection and workflow. That's still very much the vibe that we have in the studio. And then when I say 10% automation, I mean quantity, speed, and streamlining processes. And that's basically where we stand here. So human craft empowered by AI.
Terrific, Mariana. That was fantastic.
20 minutes.
Fantastic. Let's go straight on to Tim and then have a little discussion afterwards. Tim,
I don't
well,
think I could hear you, Neil. Is this just me? Ah, yeah, it
oh,
was just me.
okay, yeah. Tim's now in again Albania. Tim, welcome.
Hi Neil. Hi Mariana. I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, actually.
Georgia. Okay.
But That's all right. Not too far. Let me just try to share the screen. Right. Okay, that should be working. Right, okay. Right. Let me put my timer as well on the side since we're a bit limited here. So we're living in a really interesting time, right? We can just do a few sketches, very basic sketches, and formulate consistent and um, detailed ideas using AI design prompting process. And on top of that, you could get inspirations from quite a plethora of sources. For example, something you find in nature, such as a pine cone, you could take those rational nature's patterns and kind of replicate it into some form of urban intervention, such as a residential tower. And of course, much like previous architects that utilizes different mediums, such as Frank Gehry, uh, I've also explored a lot of different mediums and how to integrate that with AI. For example, crumbling pieces of paper, and then prompting, for example, Frank Gehry himself back into this process to create articulations consistent of a particular architect style. So these are series of experiments where I've also tested out with different architects, obviously the likes of Zaha Hadid and Daniel Libeskind, um, chosen because of their distinct architectural language and how it could be replicated through artificial intelligence and prompting via their name. And of course, we can take those ideas further and try to develop it as a project. So let's go back to where this sort of started on my side. Um, Around 2023, as you guys know, when Midjourney just started, that was the first time really, and DALL-E too, first time that I've seen artificially generated visuals, and it kind of really clicked to me. And just like Mariana as well, I worked as a Hadid Architects. Great to see her here as well, as I've just came from another conference earlier today, co-paneling some of our previous colleagues. And again, Zaha Hadid is prolific in the way she designs and all her forms and articulations, the complexity and the sort of artistry from the sculptural process at Maya, all the way down to the parametric design process. More so of what I do on my side when I was there working at computational design team with Shajay. We've taken a lot of these kind of rather sculptural forms and understand how to rationalize it for architectural process and production. And so we work closely with a construction team, such as a unicorn project, which I've helped out rationalize sculptural doubly curved geometries into rationalized and repeatable forms that could be replicated more feasibly. So with that background, I think it was interesting for me to take that rational approach to artificial intelligence because at the time it was quite chaotic. And so right from the start, I approached it in a very different perspective. With the background, I wanted to see what is you know, the predispositions of AI. For example, if you were to prompt a villa design by Zaha Hadid, and how do we take our rational understanding of architecture to construction to bring it to real life? And we wouldn't consider this type of architecture something that would, be representative of the excellence of what we did at the time. So, I wanted to take a methodical approach in designing with AI. And right at the time, with Midjourney, for example, there's prompt crafting, which is an art in itself, and also curating the process as well as varying from coarse variation to fine tuning to making sure that the details work through your understanding of detail construction, how to make sure that things really work out in the long run. And that process is one of the process that's led me to develop more complex sort of understanding between language and design and how AI is all part of that process. So fluidity is explored through a plethora of different construction techniques. I've explored in combination of, future forward fluidity design with classical architecture such as Renaissance. I've explored intersection such as this was the Art Nouveau collection, and then Gothic. And that's what's an interesting thing is how AI can really converge very core different concepts. And I want to break those down. And one of the first projects I've broken it down into you know, individual components such as the stone column capital, in which it's been rationalized through our 3D modeling process. So I've just taken it and modeled in 3D and sent the drawings to a skilled stonemason, and we managed to produce this one-to-one physically, a completely AI designed idea through our, well, driven by our process, and then finally ended in, a form that has been materialized. So this was the start of something really, really curious. And that's when I decided to really push this further and really start a practice organized on this, really trying to push forward this concept of using AI. And so, since Al Hadid, I founded the office in near Oxford Circus in London. And this is where we try to, delve into the research, delve into the architectural process that can be now reinvented in some ways because of AI. And we also have various projects under NDA due to how young we are as a practice now. So we could just mention a few, especially the ones that have been published, such as Lake Bled. This is a very interesting project located in the most protected cultural area of Slovenia. In fact, it's the number one destination of the country. Beautiful lake, and surrounding the lake are very representative vernacular architecture of well, timber villas. And so these are cultural heritage of the region, and that's a very interesting aspect because it's a unique challenge for us to approach it through AI. Because on one hand, client wants world-class hospitality. On the other hand, they want to also celebrate heritage and make sure that we can get it past the post, as in get approval from the Heritage Committee, which are notorious for being very strict. The only other project there from international team was Chipperfields, and they did a museum across from our site. So we wanted to really make sure that the heritage aspects of the project is going to be the core driving force of our concept. So we start by taking heritage data sets. As you can see, this is one of our workflows, wide range of data set that we collected, and we ensured that they are very representative of the region. And that is also fed into our AI design process at the time. And that's driven partly by the existing data, partly by our prompting, and partly by our own database. And through that process, we discover certain design motifs that we found to be strong potentials to develop into holistic concepts, such as taking the form of the what they call the rhizolyths, which is their this extruding veranda geometry representative of their typologies. And so we wanted to sort of reinvent that from contemporary light, but also this allows a lot of daylighting. It opens up these small houses, and it also provides a nice high ceiling. And this is also because we had to really contain the building to a specific dimension, both the roof, uh, even slopes, everything has been pre-programmed by heritage committee. So in order to create a heightened luxury space, we wanted to work from interior. So this is where we also gone into hand sketching, taking these opportunities as ways for us to heighten the visual senses through using AI, materializing, and finally taking that into 3D modeling and making sure that the architecture is well resolved and rational. And of course, the traditional aspects of architecture, such as program and design, that does not get replaced by AI. But in some ways, we have been doing using AI partly to augment the process, such as through our data analysis and optimization. We can optimize this particular project for window views and for optimizing solar radiation. and things like area efficiency and path efficiencies, which are lesser drivers than the window views, for example, because it's all several different modular villas looking into the lake at different ways. And we want to sort of maximize that. It's a sort of real estate maximization. And finally, that process ends up with a 3D model. And our 3D model ends up then to accurate AI rendering. So AI is really, for us, quite integrated. I suppose a bit more different from Mariana's stance here. We just see it in various stages of architecture, including the technical rationalization stage as well as the post rendering stage. And that's where we then take it onto the stage of developing and presenting the final vision with AI as well as designing the details. And so we produce all of our visuals in-house as well, and making sure that the details are meticulously resolved. Our collective global master plan and landscape design is also done so between us and the local landscape consultant. And next project will show us a larger scale project. We also began working on a lot larger scale urban projects. This is kind of one of our medium scale projects that has recently been announced, so we can sort of acknowledge a certain extent. Right now, we are working on this new project in the Red Sea, and this is a luxury resort. And what's interesting about this project is that we did work on the concept stage very in a very expedited way because of, it's a Middle Eastern client, so they really had quite short time to develop projects. And this is where I think AI really comes in. We can develop these in a very rapid pace by hand sketching and even using AI to then rationalize the hand sketching and then finalizing the hand sketch to bring it into visualization. And for this particular set, a team of urbanists and architects worked together to produce the programming and the hand sketch. And we were able to actually bypass completely 3D modeling process. And we find that to be, an interesting potential for developing projects. Of course, eventually it's all going to be then developed through 3D modeling, but for various stages now, we could actually manage to bypass the 3D modeling process for delivery of the end results. And that includes things in the architectural scale. We had floating cabanas designed uh, for the waterfront as well. And of course, with AI, you can explore daytime, nighttime views. And so here's a video, but I think because time is short, I'm just going to let you guys find it online on the client's official website. There's also a lot of our visual and video. But the key is that we're now kind of separating into three main, I will call it clusters, but also like different groups. We have our design studio, our research lab, which is now sort of dedicated for this type of research, as well as visualization team, which is now beginning to separate into a separate endeavor. And with labs, we have a lot of very interesting experiments. So we're one of the few firms that are working closely, well, one of the few architecture firms working very closely with a lot of the AI companies. So we have working with Meta, with NVIDIA. This particular project is with NVIDIA and Microsoft, where we developed this sort of early prototype of AI rendering process for real-time rendering with applications. So you can imagine utilizing this, prompting something and then rendering maybe your hand models and things like that. And of course, we also have an innovative partnership with Meta. So we did some work with, sort of the Meta headsets and to actually design in 3D space, which I think is exciting because you kind of vision the space and understand it spatially better than to sketch things in 2D. And we're using AI to real-time render that. And finally, we're also programming large language model directly with parametric workflows. So for example, here is Urban GPT. We would be able to type create a river, wide river that spans from southwest to northeast, and it would just do that if you input a CAD plan. We say add skyscrapers and offices, create a suburban district in the southeast corner. These are, natural language that either you or the client can provide. And we were able to create the large language model and a parametric workflow that integrates the process into um, technically correct results, but also at some point you can link that to visualization process. So here you can see that we are linking that to a diffusion model process. Okay, so we are still working on the prototype. Here's some of the early previews of the kind of like the interface. And of course, AI also gets into coding. I think already mentioned by Mariana. We also explore how coding can be done with parametric directly through AI. And that's also a fun process that I think will continually improve as the technology keeps on improving. Master plan optimization, I think that is definitely one of the more effective ways to utilize artificial intelligence in a more technical approach where there's so much large data sets that you will require to, emphasize and optimize in an urban design context. So to be able to program artificial intelligence to easily calculate the efficiencies and then produce rapid results is something that really helps you in the long run to produce long-term successful projects. And our visualization team are now tackling their own design workflow, and their implementation of AI is also different from our research and our core design team. For example, we started becoming inventive of how to tell architecture as a story, and one of them is our let me just mute that. One of them is also how we explore alternative means to tell the story of architecture. And for example, here's a set of called living sketches that we've been doing for quite a while. And now this is also a service that we've offered since then to a lot of clients that really likes to reimagine their architecture in different styles and new sort of architectural sketch integrated ways to showcase their projects in exciting ways. Okay, so if I just skip forward, if things don't get stuck, there we go. Now, visualization service, there's quite a lot of things we do as well. Obviously, generation, materialization, all the way to animation, and then visual refinements. We take it as a obviously a form of art, where a team of CGI artists take frame by frame and make sure that everything's well curated. And finally, you can see one of our projects that we released more recently with this workflow. And you can see the sort of quality that AI has helped us achieve today compared to before. And this client is, in south of Spain. They have a lot of their pre-designed visualizations, but then we come in and we create the whole narrative, the storytelling, and we make sure that the visual is impeccable, and there's a lot of this cinematography that's involved. So we also began hiring cinematographers in our team, which is a unique approach, but we do see sort of architecture, visualization, all such as a form of collective process. And as you know, it's very kind of human driven as a process. So even for us, we find that a lot of the machine process, it's easy for anyone to do to either make images or videos or things with AI, but it's all about the core team that's behind it. And that's also one of the reasons why when I began the company, we started hiring through international design competitions and hiring hackathons and things like that, because we really needed the team to showcase, their level of efficiency with the tool, but also their visual acuity. And that's something very hard to find, as I think, a lot of the a bulk of architecture firms, there's a lot to do with production. And when AI came to the scene, there's going to be less and less of that. And so the core team assets will become as more definitely more important. The guys that are managing and organizing the core vision, and that is sort of disseminating the sort of process and the vision. And so we have to make sure it's a small team. Right now we're 10 people, but we're trying to make sure that this process really is effective. So that's why, although it's very difficult, even to hire folks in London, as recently there's been sort of a lot of immigration changes, as we've all heard, but regardless, we are just making sure that we get the best people in the team as well. So we've been, also sponsoring visas for many of our different teammates and making sure that the talent is an international pool, regardless of the sort of, government changes that's been happening. But as it's happening and as AI technology continues to improve, we believe that this disruption will happen in all facets of not just architecture, but in all careers, and especially in the creative domain. Artists, graphic designers, we already see huge shifts in that industry. And with architecture, as it is a very human-driven process, it's going to become more and more based off of the core human merit that drives the project and lesser about draftsmanship or about, the production process that is used to be done manually. So that ends my part. I am very excited to see where AI continues to push all of our companies, everyone who's involved in AI, and thanks for this opportunity.
Tim, thank you so much. These two presentations were fascinating. I just wanted to maybe we've got time for about 10 minutes to quickly just discuss things, but maybe I could just start in a very objective way in terms of statistics. Mariana was saying that 90% of her work is manual and 10% AI. For you, Tim, what do you consider it to be?
Yeah, well, possibly right now it's hard to pinpoint a percentage because for every project we go by it differently. Even prior to I worked on a bridge project in another company prior to Zaha, and we utilize structural optimization and we allow sort of the natural algorithms to completely designate what is the most efficient design process, and then we take our design from there. So although it is very human, uh, sort of human maintained as a process, I think there's a lot of beauty in allowing it's almost like nature to take form. Generative architecture is very fascinating. And sort of that's my kind of algorithmic side of my background coming in. And I see AI as that as well, as there's a lot of autonomy that we should give it a chance to really see where that goes. Of course, it goes without saying that, the human architect's intuition has to be the baseline to make sure everything is excellently processed throughout the entire procedure. But we want to allow agency because we don't yet know how much AI is capable. And, I want to just say that I don't know today and I don't know tomorrow, but we're going to allow AI, leeway to prove to us what it's capable of.
And you said that your practice is 10 people, whereas Mariana's is either going from 5 to 15. Is there the same kind of like inflation, or does your office also contract at times, or is it always a steady 10?
Yeah, we do have a remote team, but that side of our 10 people core team, like we do like annual contracts. So we have the office. If you guys have a chance, welcome to visit as well. It's in Marylebone and Oxford Circus. It's between that location. And we find it that, a lot of our teammates also come from either Westminster, UCL, or AA, from the same category of people that we trust to work on these type of parametric school of thoughts that can also work efficiently with AI.
Just another point of comparison. Both of you were at the DRL, and both of you went on to Vazaha's. Are you?
Impact. Sorry.
Your MTech. Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But roughly in terms of timeline, were you contemporaries at the AA, or I think Mariana was first, right?
It is, right? I'm not sure. I don't remember
Yeah.
seeing Tim, but also DRL and MTech, weirdly enough, they are in the same building, but I don't know why they don't blend. They should blend more than they do, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a kind of friendly rivalry between the two. They're upstairs, downstairs.
Yeah.
But for me, I always go upstairs. I have a lot of friends DRL. Actually, Cesar, I don't know, Mariana, you know
Yeah, of
Cesar, right?
course.
He's good friend from DRL, and he's the one that introduced me to Shajay, which is how I got into Zaha as well. So it's
Ah,
a
I didn't
small
know.
world.
I
Yeah,
didn't know. I so
but
you knew Cesar before you went to Zaha?
yeah, we were friends. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
So
It
Mariana, I
seems
heard
Cesar
of
is like
your stuff.
another. Yeah, Cesar was like a generation under my generation, so that means you are his generation. Yeah, we are just like one year apart, I think, or 2 years apart.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fascinating.
I have to say I've already been following Mariana since since I was already studying and she was in Zaha making headwaves, and that's partially how I managed to also think of a strategy to since I got into Zaha to how to create your own brand and do your own thing. So well done for that.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
then actually, Tim was like, I was almost poaching Tim for Wilder. Remember this? I was sincerely considering to get Tim on Wilder. Well, they're lost, and also not ours because we did better. But yeah, he would be like a really good at Wilder World.
So you're both actually strangely very much located back within an architectural project. I think for a while, Mariana, you were kind of heading towards the metaverse. Now you've come back into the architectural fold. I've got two questions. One is, to what extent do you market yourself to your clients using the word AI? Does that become part of it or not?
I've had mixed reactions. Which is quite interesting. In the beginning, it was a plus to say yeah AI, and they wanted everything to be named AI, the AI master plan, the AI everything, which didn't. You knew that maybe this happens to you also, Tim. Some clients just bring the AI to the name, just it's just the marketing, but they don't really understand what that would entail or what it means. And then I started having meetings with potential clients. And which I was using the same strategy, like, oh yeah, now we are integrating AI, and they would interrupt me abruptly and say, "But you do more than AI." And I was like, yeah, actually, we are known for not doing just AI. No, but just to be very clear, you do more than AI, right? I was like, listen, we do 3D model, okay? Yes, you will get a 3D model if you ask on your deliverables a 3D model. So I think you have to be smart on how you adapt on these meetings, right? So now I would encourage everyone to do both, to say both, right? If you can do both, market yourself as someone who can do both and can deliver both, because some clients get scared that you say AI and they think, oh, this is just an Instagram person or an Instagram AI generated, and that's why she's famous because she does AI. But some of them will actually want to know that you use AI. Actually, it's almost like, why are you asking what kind of workflow I do, right? I'm a business, I do the workflow I want to do. Tell me what's your deliverables. I will decide if I use AI or not. I will decide if I will 3D model or not. Now we are on another project that was actually quoted as an AI facade thing. And then just today, actually, there was a meeting. I was like, oh, can we see the 3D? I was like, what? What do you mean? Who said we are doing 3Ds, So it's a bit like that. I think today, because AI is so well known and so spoken, they want to hear how you do the project, but in reality, there was never a time before when they would ask, what are the tools that you're doing to submit, right? Because what we want is to deliver, right? The way you go to your delivery, it's up to your business plan and strategy. And AI is a business strategy for you to optimize time. You don't have to say what you use or not. So if they are asking, use both. Say that you do both. I do 3D, I do AI.
Uh, How about you, Tim?
Yeah, that's very core to our everyday struggles, obviously. Um, I think we've been, I could call it typecasted as the ones doing AI. We've marketed ourselves heavily with regards to utilizing AI. So there's going to be unique challenges with that. For example, our late blood project, we really just um, presented a whole plethora array of options right from the get-go because that's the efficiency of AI, right? Some call it Pinterest on steroids, but in reality, it is just very iterative how we can just generate so many directions to have the client discussions. So the client discussions was going very fluid because the client loved to see opportunities and window shop in a way to see I like this from A, I like this from B. But then for the Lake Blood project, we were also working with a local architect. And at the time, they're definitely much more traditional. They're a small boutique team and they are a bit older in range. So they don't really embrace technology, possibly even have difficulties embracing in parametric design to an extent. So working with a very traditional architect, they were at the beginning very reluctant. They just said, I don't understand why to the client. They said, why'd you hire these guys? They have the designs don't look right, the renders, the balconies. Instead of looking at the global vision, which is the discussion that we're trying to have, they try to take it apart and just say, this looks just unresolved. These guys don't look like they're serious. And the client luckily said, okay, why don't you disengage from this process and let them do their thing? So the local architect got disengaged. We worked on the project alone for a month. We came back and we presented this to both the client and the local architect, but the rationalized version, more so what I show in this presentation. And they were just astonished and they said, even the local architect, I remember after the presentation, first thing he said was, well, I'll have to hand it to you. Congratulations. You've convinced what this process is about because throughout the process, it's about getting the quantity of options and then refining. It's an alchemy process where at the end result, it is exactly the exact same type of um, the perfection that you would expect from any sort of architectural process. It's about getting to the end result. So yes, like I agree with Mariana as well. We say, don't judge, thou shalt not judge by thy process, but by what you can do with it. And we just let the product speak for itself. We let our service speak for itself. And any client that's worked with us for more than a month will understand. And this is why we have retainer contracts for retaining clients. And we've been growing, scaling up since then because they just love working with rapid feedback and results and being efficient. So I think that's hugely beneficial.
And one thing that I noticed, particularly with Mariana's work, is that there is a kind of post-production um, video world, which is not typically an architectural thing. Is that a new venture where you can see a new market, Mariana?
Yeah, it is. It is not I can see. I can tell that it's a new market. If you really want to stop architecture right now and dedicate yourself on AI storytelling, you have a nice portfolio of clients for yourself right now because the more we are experiencing media and marketing, which will become like it's unstoppable right now, and brands really need to show and to compete. The wider this market for video and storytelling with AI will be. So if you want to place yourself on that industry, I would say it will be a lot. We will have a lot less headaches as well, and they will be fast paced. Obviously, they are short projects unless you get a retainer, like Tim was saying, from a client, and you just generate a fast pace for the same clients every month, right? Which is the goal. So it became kind of an industry that we made up here slowly because we had one video that was commissioned to us from the Philippines, and then we thought, you know what, this might be a very interesting. I call them the bites, snacks or snack bites from the studio, which has it has a stable income and it does entertain the studio with some kind of production that it keeps coming. It doesn't stop, and it has indeed a retainer as well. And then it was really interesting. I recommend anyone who's starting a business to pick up on that because you should I know it's a bit more on business dev, but you should make sure that you have your big projects coming and they take ages to sign. They take ages for terms and agreements to be in common. It take ages, right? The big heavy meals. And they are also confidential, so you cannot even show them. But then take one stream that is short and it's fast produced and it can have retainers. And in our case, it was AI CGI. And it happened naturally also because I brought Kaitan as the lead of the team. He's from Poland, and he was already doing it by himself on his own little world. And he was very good in human introduction, very good, especially very realistic and very mature as well. And then that happened seamlessly in the past 6 months. And then we started doing marriages, which is very funny. But I also have to tell everyone, like I mentioned on my presentation, there is a limitation to that technology too for videos, right? Because it's great for media, social media. It's great for formats like our computer formats or desktops. For wider formats like huge pixel streaming LED screens, it's actually not there yet. But well, fingers crossed.
Tim, there was one thing that I found extraordinary about one thing you said. You didn't go into 3D. You were operating, and I could see this with kind of Genie 3 and that kind of thing, that we don't necessarily go into 3D. Do you want to comment on that a bit? Why did you not go into 3D?
Because we didn't have to. Because I think if there's an opportunity for you to skip certain process, if the stage warrants it, then you should take it. AI, I think, is about now providing opportunities to take certain warranted shortcuts, especially underscore warranted. I think there's a lot of process in traditional architecture that could be uh, sort of reconfigured because it was such a, A to B, B to C structure. And AI comes along to the scene and just kind of flips that backwards. Instead of having a process going from, a coarse idea into a fine idea, very prescriptively, we now have a plethora of ideas right from the get-go as a cloud of possibilities. And then we sort of hover in the sort of neural network, latent space of possibilities. And that it kind of also reconfigures how you think as a designer, as an architect, because you have so much potential to just swing left and swing right. And now you open a new door and you're navigating this world of network. Either I'm talking about network as an idea or neural network. So it kind of reframes how you think about design. And for that example, if I were to say my hand sketches that I drew a vision of can be readily materialized into a marketing package for a project, then let's do that. Why waste time modeling if that phase does not necessitate that particular process? And I think we have to ask ourselves that every step of the way now. Like, what is our deliverable? What is the end goal? And that could continue on if we keep asking this question as technology gets better. We might be asking ourselves, why are we still using AutoCAD? Why are we using this and that if agents can now automate the process and improve things on our behalf? So we want to posit these questions constantly because these questions are one by one getting answered as the technology improves. So I'm very excited to see how much further we can take this.
Maybe Marianne, I could just ask you for your comments on that because you use Rhino a lot, right?
I use Maya a lot.
But
Well,
yeah.
in our case, when the architecture can afford to be generic, I would leave. I've always been in projects that most of them they did require a physical term, and that includes a BIM. But when the architecture can afford to be generic or small scale, I would probably avoid doing 3D, or I will push AI until it can no longer go. But our architecture has been quite landmark and symbolic, and needs to represent an icon. And you traditionally, or in my belief, not even traditionally, in my belief, architecture that needs to be symbolic and needs to be landmark needs to be tailored. And with no degree of automation, I see a big difference on Bershka, on Zara, on Shein, and then McQueen, Chanel, Dior. So not saying that McQueen and Chanel do not use automated tools. Obviously, they do. They have to. But there is an essence on the way that they do tailored design that expresses in fashion and increases as well in architecture for the same type of clients. There are clients that are okay for Zara, and there are clients who actually need a Chanel that night. And when that happens, it obviously still needs automation for the process, and that helps a lot for the clients to pick and choose. But then it comes to a point that you actually tailor. And I've seen a huge difference in projects that I have generated with AI until I could no longer go. And me personally picking up on the model by myself as directors. 3D modeling, and you get something different, and you get even annoyed by them. It's like it really is AI. It's not that like you 3D model the project and like, yeah, this is a stunning piece, right? With the craftsman that it needs. And it depends on the client. You need to be smart and adapt to the scale, adapt to the symbolism of the project. And I will remain as on the tailor side of architecture. I'm pretty sure that's my skill and that's what my students do mostly. And then they get hired from the office because they learn the tailor, they learn the detail. So yeah, but it's Tim said it well. Like it's you need to be smart about what tools to use for a client, and they should not ask you for what is the process. That's the key, because you, as a smart architect, you know what's the process. You decide what's the process. You decide when 3D modeling comes. You decide when AI takes over fully or just half. And right now, as a business strategist, I know that my clients do appreciate the tailored design, and that means 3D modeling.
Yeah, my suspicion is we're on the brink of a 3D revolution that's going to happen soon, partly because of the spatial intelligence being pushed by NVIDIA and Fei Li and that kind of world, but also in terms of the kind of say Genie 3, which is kind of remarkable. I was listening to Demis Hassabis, who said it's kind of figured out what the intuitive physics of the world look like, and I suspect that these kind of advances are going to change the way we look at 3D in the future. We've got one question in the chat. Maybe if you've got time to ask this one. Hold on a second. I think is it Mitra? Did you ask that question? It's okay. Let me just read it out. My question is this. How did AI assist in refining or visualizing aspects of the design? And which aspects of concept iteration were automated by AI, such as parametric adjustments, pattern generation, structural optimization? And how did you validate these outputs against your design criteria?
Everything can start.
Yeah, okay. My question is this. How did AI assist in refining or visualizing aspects of the design? And which aspects of concept iteration were automated by AI, such as parametric adjustments, pattern generation, structural optimization? And how did you validate these outputs against your design criteria?
That's fine. I just feel like Mariana and I have both answered that through our slide by slide presentation. But if I were to just add anything else, is that yeah, what we've showcased is the process of driving AI through a design iterative process. Both Mariana has shown in her, different facades, and I've shown it in our heritage data sets, and then re-input into our own, and of course also rationalization, uh, using modeling process, and then parametric adjustment of, for example, floor plates. That's what I showcased with the lake blood projects, is how that's being sort of manipulated, and also Mariana's scripts as well. We can see. So I think that sort of, answered through in hindsight. If Mariana want to add anything.
Yeah, I think that was like summary of both presentations. What's important here, I feel, is that people should try. They should try everything, because honestly, if I could share my screen right now, I'm literally in right now putting lines on the top of some clients' plan to extract the 3D. So this just to say that we need to try things and we need to encourage other people to try them. Otherwise, we'll get stuck to these primary processes of doing architecture, which it's still, I mean, over 90% of people are still very much not even doing 3Ds. I mean, I have plans with no 3D. So we need to try it, and that's what I encourage everyone to do it, and not to be lazy, because actually AI is already quite easy on surface level. So I hope this is what this series of talks that Neil is organizing. I hope this is what he's doing right now, is to encourage you to open and to try.
No, absolutely. That is the way we're going. I think we should let you guys go now. This has been unbelievably fascinating, I think, certainly for me, I'm sure for all sorts of students. But I think both of you have been icons for the younger generation on how we can go ahead. And I see you guys as kind of surfers in a sense. You're working with the technology as it's evolving and trying to use it to your advantage. And of course, it is an ever-evolving technology. Things are going to change. Nano Banana was only out recently, but things are changing constantly, and the profile of the profession is also changing. So we got some tantalizing glimpses into how architects are doing wedding videos and post-production video visualizations. And fantastic, wonderful. This is really a fantastic snapshot. And thank you for making time out of your busy schedules. We literally had to shift it forward because of very important client meetings. So let you get back to your client meetings. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Mariana. Fabulous. This is really great for the young kids of today to go and get some inspiration and some instruction and so on. Fantastic,
Awesome.
wonderful.
Thanks,
Amazing.
Theo.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
weekend, everyone. Good luck, Verena. Bye,
And
guys.
See
bye
you.
Yes,
now.
incredible presentations. Thank you both.
So.
Hmm.
Bye.
It's a very nice little twist. We're going to introduce Lorena now, who is working in a different way, working in mainstream practice, working for Gensler, and trying to figure out for the company how to adjust an existing company with some reputation for a world of AI. Lorena's working for the Miami branch of Gensler. She's also doing a doctoral design program with myself at FIU, where she's looking at the impact of AI on the office. So, Lorena, it's great to see you and welcome.
Yes, likewise, Neil. Thank you so much for the opportunity and as always the guidance along the thesis process. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and just hide the media controls. Okay, great. All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Let me see if this is sharing without the kind of presenter view. 1 second. Apologies, I'm getting a little bit of a technical difficulty here.
I just noticed a couple of YouTube questions, which maybe we can address later. Okay.
Sorry, just trying to switch this. There we are. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again, Neil, for the introduction. For those of you who haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, my name is Lorena Knezovich, and I am a licensed architect and lead AP, and also a doctoral candidate in the FIU DDES program. I have had all of my professional experience working within a number of larger corporate architectural offices. So I come from that kind of combined perspective of my past experiences when I'm reviewing this kind of huge challenge that we're all trying to grapple with, which is really the future of the architectural practice. And, the thesis research that I'm involved in is trying to understand how to communicate design value and how to start thinking about how AI is impacting the way that we communicate what we do and how we do it, and even trying to shift the profession into this kind of future where we'll have to make some adjustments to the way that we perceive our skills, the systems of the industry itself, kind of understanding that background, and even the services that we may provide. So to dive in, let's just start with the basics of our day-to-day work and the kind of skills that we're already implementing. In order to think through, what we're training for, what our people are doing, we have to understand what's the difference between what AI is able to do and what humans are able to do. And if we were to just simplify it to its rawest form, AI is exceptionally good at quantity, both understanding quantity from data analysis, reviewing mass amounts of information, identifying patterns, and also producing a large amount of quantity of text, of information, of even, generating meeting minutes or data based off of what's there. And humans are good at understanding quality. So it's understanding context, judgment, intuition, this kind of ill-defined problems where the parameters aren't fully set. So, it's trying to understand the difference between the two. And if you would bear with me through this process, if we were to try to map out what a human professional might do in our day-to-days, like myopic tasks, you may be able to project that out across the top from people-centric to technical skill sets, and from bottom to top, from production-based type of work to critical thinking skills. So if you were going through people-centric, that might be client-facing skills ranging from, even the web analytics, which is more production, all the way up to leveraging the connections and business strategy. You may then have team management types of skills, so really integrating that kind of team strategy, delegation of tasks, and the coordination. The actual product or the service design itself, going from production tasks might be drawing generation and image generation, all the way up to really optimizing it for the client. And then that technical expertise may go from, quality control and identifying minor errors to really predicting problems before they occur, and thought leadership in the field. So if we start to think of in the past, this was all the things that humans were doing, humans were implementing in their day-to-day work. Now with AI, there are multiple kind of stages that are already underway. As we see, even today, AI is already able to help us with a lot of those kinds of production tasks, including drawing generation, including those kind of QA, QC reviews, checklists, and the like. If we kind of continue through that kind of next stage, that starts to think through a bit more of these kind of critical parameters. We're starting to see a lot of technologies out there like Autodesk Forma, even LookX, and even some companies are creating proprietary tools where you're able to define critical parameters and have AI shape make the buildings as a 3D in order to respond to that. That kind of definition of critical parameters may go beyond just the design itself, but it goes into even the data monitoring or even task tracking. It's where we've now trained the AI as an agent, as a bot, to understand our kind of background needs, and then it's solving for them in real time. So it's that kind of next level of thinking. But if we continue on in our sort of mapping of what AI might be able to do, this is where people get really scared in the architectural profession. It's a question of, well, what happens with our actual product that we're producing, our service design itself? What happens? Is AI going to take over all of these areas of work and really just generating work for the client? And that's where that kind of quantity is. And frankly, there are some aspects of the service where there are tools out there like Quibs and the like that can do test fits, and they're creating a kind of generated product of test fits or feasibility yield studies that is just a generative kind of design. And so there's a kind of quantity output of that. And certainly there are some clients that will look for that, and there's some clients that are going to be using that. But there is an opportunity here to understand what would it look like if we were creating these kinds of quality based products where it's not about, and we're defining our work as not about it being the most rapid fire test fit generator. It's about that customization for the client, for their values, for their particular return on investment, optimizing even for the client's clients. In the case of an office space, it would be the office worker, but in the case of hospitality, it's working with them to understand the return on investment of those guests that are traveling into the space, and defining the solution. And when we kind of look across the kind of spectrum of what it is that we do, one might argue that those critical thinking skills are more important than ever, because that is really what will stand the test of time, rather than all of these kinds of production tasks that AI is then absolutely going to be helping us generate and work forward. There are a number of studies that have been done by Harvard Business School, IBM, MIT, and there's a resounding response that AI has a sort of skill leveling effect across industries. It's disrupting industries across the board. And there's this incredible study by Ethan Mollick that was produced where you could see this kind of massive shift in quality improvement between those who are using AI and those who are who didn't use AI versus those who are using AI. And even within that study, there's a set of data that I went through and actually interpolated to create this kind of graph so that we could see it a little bit more. So in that study, they actually did a comparison of a series of tasks between low-skilled workers and high-skilled workers. And they saw, what was the shift in improvement when that low-skilled worker, so someone who's like an entry level in the position, before they used AI and that kind of bottom half of the spectrum to after they used AI. You see a vast shift in improvement. However, you notice with the high-skilled workers, so someone who has 10 plus years of experience, before AI, they were already, achieving a really high quality, and that shift after AI was a notable improvement, but absolutely not as dramatic of an effect. So what that tells us is that before AI, if you're a low skilled worker, it's incredible. There's an opportunity to bridge that experience gap by approximately 28%. But that, after AI, even that low skilled worker won't be able to achieve that kind of 5% gap, at least within the parameters of the study. We're noticing that kind of 5% gap at the end. So what's interesting is that, those skill sets will still remain. Those skill sets are still kind of going to stand the test of time. AI will help us get there faster into that level of expertise, but expertise does matter. So when we look at our kind of mapping out of those skill sets, we think, well, who are those people who are looking at critical thinking? Those are our principals, our technical directors, our design managers, our senior project architects. Those are the people who are oftentimes leading it. But then we ask ourselves, in an apprenticeship-based industry where typically we learn through production, what happens to all of those people who are junior level and are needing to get to a level of expertise? We want the industry to grow. But how do we get there? And so my proposition here is to really, the industry needs to focus and double down on mentorship because, as a design director that I was speaking to recently had said so poignantly, AI could be a race to the bottom, in terms of fees and so forth. But when you really think of it this way with, with critical thinking, it's a race to the top. We're trying to get to that high level of expertise and trying to see who can be that expert faster and learn more and learn better. And I certainly think that's through mentorship and increasing our skills into the root of the work itself, not necessarily the production tasks. So now that we've kind of thought about our day-to-day, let's take a wide step back and think about some of the industry trends that have been identified over time. So you've seen in some of the previous presentations of more focused effort into emerging practices or practices that are smaller but have a strong foundation in the way that they produce their work. But let's take a moment to understand some of the larger firm insights. So here I'll walk us through a couple of graphs that are from AIA's reporting most recently in 2024. And, there's an importance in understanding what happens with larger firms because a larger firm, and I'm talking a corporate environment, HOK, HKS, Gensler, Perkins and Will, SOM and so forth. These are firms that account for 2/3 of our national staff and billings, 2/3 of the architects in the industry. And also the percentage of revenue as it relates to that is even higher year over year in comparison to some of the smaller firms. So what these larger firms are doing is really impacting the industry at large of architecture and setting that standard of care for all others to follow. Additionally, AI, while the smaller firms have the benefit of being able to be nimble and maybe not have so many constraints and can use some of the largest amount of tools just from a percentage. Generally speaking, the larger companies are investing more in research and have indicated, at least to the AIA reportings, that they are more likely to be using AI than maybe some of the mid-size or smaller companies out there. So here we are, the larger firms reporting that 61% of their company is currently using AI in comparison to some of the smaller firm reportings. And what's interesting, I'd like to call it out. I like to call out the things that maybe people don't want to talk about or notice, but there's a conversation associated to profitability in the past years. This was reported out as, great profits are increasing, but you notice that in the past few years, profits have actually decreased. And one might say that that's an effect of COVID, but at the same time, there's a larger conversation that this is sparking as it relates to profitability and our kind of technology improvements. And just one more kind of note here, I happen to be working at Gensler. I'm very appreciative and grateful of that. My reportings here are, really my own research, but I think it's interesting to note a comparison of these different revenues across the board, the top 10 architecture firms, and you see even the kind of revenue per capita. And Gensler is the first and has on that list in terms of the height of revenue, and actually has a revenue per capita of per employee of about $500,000. So it's incredibly impactful. And the question is, what value are these offices providing clients that leads to this higher profitability and higher level of revenue generation? And what are we doing to kind of continue to learn from that, to continue doing so in this kind of age of AI? So if we see this mapping of the socioeconomic trends by the Fees Bureau, I particularly think this is a really impactful diagram as it highlights the economic trends down below as a bar across the way. And then we see the architecture industry in red in comparison to the construction industry in blue in our GDP. And you see that the architecture industry, even in comparison to construction, which you would think would be like our hand-in-hand partners within this, the architecture industry is extremely volatile to any kind of economic downturns, while the construction industry maintains its relatively steady growth as it relates to GDP. And if we were to also overlay one more element of technology as it relates to these elements, we have some of the advent of the antitrust laws, which occurred in 1972. Maybe coincidental, maybe correlation, but there was a drop after that case. Then you have AutoCAD, and then BIM around the in 2000s, and now we have AI, and we wonder what the impacts might be. If not to dwell on this too far today, but if we were to just kind of walk through the technology impacts across the architecture industry over time, it's significant to be able to understand a little bit of the trends that we're saying. So we had this sort of originally in the 1990s, hand drafting. We had really our billing structures were a retainer, or there was a sort of general percentage of construction costs. And you had these firm sizes that were smaller, but you had a master architect, draftsman, and so forth. Then when blueprinting came through, we had standardized fee schedules that was established by the AIA, and even REBA at the time was establishing similar fee schedules that sort of regulated the industry, which somewhat created a leveling effect where there was an equalizer of our work and a sort of value established. This, at least in the US, this was regulated until we had this antitrust rule that promoted competition. So now those fees were blown out of the water, and essentially, depending on the competition, you could then make adjustments as we would move forward. But the firm sizes at that time grew significantly, and internal departments started forming. Then you had the advent of CAD, and here we started seeing a change from, rather than construction fees, to more hourly based fees, more lump sum, but still learning and speaking in terms of hourly and input and hours themselves. You see larger teams expanding, and you see a demand for more and more optionality as well. And that expands even further when we had the kind of input of BIM, and you have these teams that are becoming much larger, much more corporate, much more global, and then you have the roles themselves, which become increasingly specialized to BIM manager, computational designer, and so forth, and they get a little bit more fragmented because of the ability to specialize. So if we were to create like large overriding statements, you may say that billing structures became more competitive over time, and they switched from construction fee to lump sum. The deliverable types themselves became faster over time, and more demand for complex deliverables, more speeds, more optionality. So the deliverable demand got much higher. Firm sizes generally over time, there are more larger firms and more corporate structures. There was a bigger kind of shift, and roles got more specialized over time as well, and managers and so forth. So, there's a lot we can learn from this and a lot we can kind of extract. What I think is really interesting is what we understand where revenue has been impacted by some of these changes over time. So what I had done in a recent study was I extrapolated from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics data. This is data that's publicly available, but the comparison of the two in the interpolation is something that I was producing in my research. So what we have here is this dark blue and light blue line is a combination of architectural services comparing the output per worker, meaning the amount of productivity, the amount of revenue generated per per worker is this light blue line. This darker blue line is the amount of hours worked. So if you were to compare the two, you see dark blue hours worked per architect, and then you see the amount of revenue produced at that time. Then similarly, we have the light green and the dark green line, which is engineering services specific to the AEC industry. So these are our direct kind of comparable equivalents in the field, such as our engineers, our mechanical engineers, electrical, structural, and the like. And you see their hours worked per worker and their output. And what's incredible is that the architectural output per worker has increased sharply, even though we haven't had a dramatic change in the hours, which means we've become, as an industry, incredibly efficient in terms of or much more efficient than we had been in terms of our work. And if you compare that to our engineering colleagues, you actually see with this uptick of this dark green line with engineering firms have gotten slightly less efficient over time. And in comparison, architecture has surpassed the engineering output by 42% more efficiency. And just anecdotally, I do believe it. I have some amazing consultants that I have the privilege of working with that are absolutely keeping up in the times in terms of BIM and coordinating in that effect. And then on the flip side, I have almost just as many engineers who are still working in CAD and doing things manually, and we're always having to grapple between the two. So just my little anecdotal evidence. But when we kind of, let's say, zoom into that engineering fee correlation, because now we've said that, architecture has become more efficient, but then when you compare the unit labor costs, so this is again from the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics data that I've extracted, the unit labor cost is more or less the equivalent of dollars per hour as an average cost of labor per the unit of work, which is an hourly rate. And if you compare over time, architecture and engineering were somewhat aligned, pretty steadily moving through. And then when you hit around 2008, around the last economic crash, from that point forward, architecture has decreased by almost 25% in comparison to engineering. And you would say that that's because of the economic cycle, but at the same time, you would have think that there was a recovery from there. So it begs the question, is there something larger at play? What has really been happening here in the last 15 to 20 years that has been so incredibly impactful? So there's a moment I think we need to talk about perception and competition. As we talked about that overall of the industry trends, we said, and before we had the kind of big documents, big documentation, all hand drafting, really large companies. Then we had the antitrust laws, Advent, and right around the time when we had the economic crash of 2008, we also had BIM emerging at that time. And I think that was a real pivoting point because of the fact that when we had more efficiency in terms of the output that we could do, it also came that economic cycle of we were trying to just lower our fees so that we could be competitive and survive. And there was a disconnect that now there's a narrative coming out that technology allows us to decrease fees. And that's really impactful, especially as it sets the tone for now with AI becoming so commonplace and accessible that is kind of in your pocket, including for our clients. And I mean, we've already had clients, I've seen it, where they walk through the door and say, I have generated my own look and feel on Midjourney. Design me this, make this work. And so it's a question of how to deal with that kind of perception shift at this time. So if we were to kind of look at this as a whole, we might be able to say that architecture has never been more productive if we look at our revenues, but at the same time, never more undervalued. We really need to start learning how to stop selling deliverables and really start selling outcomes and that kind of return on investment and define our value differently. So if we kind of start thinking about that, it's a heavy problem, a real challenge. We have to think about our services and how to reevaluate the business that we have, what things we can even offer, how we can reshape how we talk about our work. And again, if we look back to our mapping of the skill sets, when you see some of that production work being appended or augmented by AI, the question of value versus time is at the forefront of our minds. So I've created a bit of a mental mapping of, design value. This is kind of done from some research of actually from marketing cycles and different trends, trying to find, how we could even define design value. And what has occurred to me is that value for design value is really we're seeing it as a product and an offer. And I found this, great, very simple definition of, the value is defined by a client's willingness to pay. If they're willing to pay, that means that their expectations are being met. But expectations are a very ambiguous thing. How are expectations defined? And you might be able to say it's a comparison in the market. So I expect that what you have done is good in comparison to what I thought other people might do. That also has to do with the client's understanding of the industry, the firm's offer, and so forward, and also the client's unique value factors. So, for example, they might say, I want something that's done quickly. In comparison to the market, you are doing things more quickly than others. If you do it successfully, you've met my expectations, and I'm going to pay you top dollar for that because I need something fast. Or it could be a totally different setup where they want something that's the most bespoke, and you are able to create something more custom than anyone else. And if you are able to make the most custom tailored to them and they trust you to do so, they would be willing to pay. So if we zoom into that kind of comparison in the market factor, there's a challenge there where we have to be able to both show how we or whatever architecture firm you're pitching, you're adding more value than the others, and also communicating your value, which is a factor of the client's understanding of the industry and how you market yourself. But within that adding more value, there are components of communicating the quality, the speed, level of customization, and reliability. And there's a lot of elements there in reliability that have to do as well with the firm's expectation, reputation, and even personal trust. There are soft skills and human factors associated with this kind of marketing. At that point, when you're talking about value, trust is a huge component. But even as we start adding more value and trying to show what we already do is better, there may be, with the amount of AI involvement, there may be a need to create completely new services. A need because there's more demands or a changing market, but also a need in that, there may be reduced fees for some of the work that we had been doing, and we need to expand our services to become more creative so that we can continue growing our industry as a whole. So if we were to, take a step back, I think, in a lot of industrial models, you may have heard of the T-shaped individual, the W-shaped individual, and so forth. But if we think of a T-shaped individual, which has a breadth of expertise across the board, across the top, and has a depth of experience in one avenue, that's something that, a lot of firms and employers look for. But why don't we think our industry as a T-shaped industry where we think of design and architecture as our depth, but these services that we offer could become extended by AI or by these kind of new technologies. So, we've seen the example in the previous presentation of even offering CGI and visualization services. That's an example of that kind of extension. And we're already seeing some of that innovation kind of come to the fold. So a traditional process would have been design, bid, build. You start the project, you finish the project, and that kind of is the end of the services that are offered. There's already innovation today where people are integrating as part of the architectural service package brand design that comes earlier, strategy, digital experience design, which is the sort of overlays of digital medium, or even physical products that are sold as a kind of iterative cycle. Then the innovation potential for tomorrow is the kind of emergence of, AI is also unlocking, augmented and virtual realities that are becoming more accessible for us. There's digital twins, there's creating digital products or digital user experience design, as well as, leaning into the fact that there are other services that we could be offering when you engage in digital twins in a really robust way, which is down to the systems of the building themselves. So I think when we start thinking of ourselves as more than architects of a typical physical product of the beginning and end of the design bid build, we're able to remain competitive for a much wider span of a building's life cycle and have more services to come. So there's been a lot that's been discussed today, and everyone, may be thinking, well, how do we go from now to the next? And while there's certainly a whole thesis worth of information, I really do believe that we can design the future by designing these processes that will get us there, zeroing in down to the skills, the systems, and the services that we're offering. So thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss today, and I'm very looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Lorena. This last slide, it kind of reminds me of the thing I always say, what we need to design right now is not another building, but the very future of our profession. This is wonderful and a great compliment to the previous two presenters who were presenting a particular cutting edge new form of practice. I mean, most practices are existing practices, and we have to adapt. They have to adapt. Can I do that? There are a couple of questions I want to ask. First, to what extent, and this is a kind of general question, to what extent do you think that we could deploy AI as a way of pointing out or providing the client with data on how we could save costs in the production process? Because I often think that the clients almost always don't have the same aesthetic sensibility. Most architects think, well, they'll show them amazing design and they'll go with it. But from my experience, I remember particularly I was talking to someone from UN Studio where they were saying that some of those sort of diagrams they would do, I mean, they were very kind of beautiful things in themselves, but the client could relate to them because they were dealing with not design, but objective issues and making it into a rational argument, an objective argument. And I'm wondering to what extent we could do the same, as it were, deploying AI to show value to the client.
No, of course. Well, what's interesting is that model, if we were to kind of think through a traditional architecture process that we have concept design, schematic, construction, then we go into construction administration, and that point of that, part of the process where the construction is being implemented, and then you have the end user that's actually utilizing the space. That's the time where clients are actually spending the most amount of their money. It's not the production cost on our end, truly, about, give or take $50,000 or $100,000. That's insignificant in comparison to the millions that they're providing in the actual construction of the work, right? So there's a discussion being had of how can we even deliver work differently with our clients. We're starting to see joint ventures between even a traditional architecture practice is working hand in hand with a construction company, and it's becoming a design build process. So what the real AI use of showing that kind of savings and value happens when you're linked with the construction process, and it happens when you're linked within a kind of joint outcome or shared outcome with your clients. There are integrated project delivery contracts that are out there. Those are it's nitty gritty. I know it's not the kind of sexiest image and thought to think about, but in this case, they're focused on, let's say you're working on a hospitality project, your client, the architect and the construction team is kind of has a shared profit center where you might say then, as an architect, I am optimizing our design such that it's going to have a reduced cost, and we're going to spend our money in the best possible way where it's going to attract an Instagrammable moment, these great features. We're spending money on design where it counts. It's going to draw in your customers and for your future kind of guests coming to this hotel, but we're going to do it in such a way that's going to save you costs in the long run. Right now, with our architectural model, as it's separated out and totally piecemeal, we're saying, we might be the team that could help you do that. And even if we did it in the best possible way, we don't really see that return on the profit. We don't get any benefit or reward for achieving that successfully. And that's where the real cost savings are, or the potential for that return on investment is. So it's this kind of integrated model. And in that case, where we're really linking, our work with the construction, you can absolutely use AI to be tracking cost estimating and understanding the amount of time that we've spent on the design in comparison to the amount of savings that we're going to have. All of these things can then be linked together. But it's almost like without that background of the contract, set up that way, it's difficult to show where the biggest value and impact is. The only way we can do it is through case study examples, in a way, of past work, past experiences, and say, in the past, if a client hasn't gone down this route, this was the kind of opportunity cost for them. That was a loss, and so forth. So it's a real challenge, and it comes back to the finances in the end of the day.
No, exactly. That's what precisely what I'm thinking, and that's the language that the client speaks. Even though we always think about design as being the most important for them, it's the bottom line is the cost. And I guess I'm thinking one thing I'm thinking right now is that well, in the second edition of my book, I included Foster and Partners. I looked at three different firms of architects, and what was interesting about them is that what they were using AI for, they weren't using to ideate, they weren't using Midjourney, they weren't using any of these image generation models, because as they put it, they know how to design. What they were using were a lot of surrogate models and things that were basically speed up the production process, and that I think is also there's a cost in that. And one of the most significant examples I came across was you mentioned LookX and Wan Yu He and LookX Cool. They did during COVID. They did a hotel from design to construction in 16 weeks. Now that is very, if you're a hotel owner, that is significant, because every day you're not renting out your rooms is lost revenue. And I think that is something I'm sure that AI is going to be a hugely significant. How does it speed up the process, and how can the client see that as another form of increased
Right.
income?
Yeah, and it's a huge, I mean, that moment of developers especially, they need companies not using AI in a sort of, in that way, but using AI so that it's creating work that is efficient and accurate enough in the moments that they need it the most. Because a developer is almost entirely at risk from day one. They're at risk when they're paying the architect, they're at risk when they're constructing, they're hugely at risk. So every single day that passes is a loss. I'm working with a client right now, and they're telling us that every single month that something, they aren't open, it's costing them about $150,000. And when you put that into context, right, of what the fees might be, and the investment on AI, and the fact that working with the idea of working with an architect that's able to deliver quickly and is able to control it so that it's accurate enough and has the expertise that it's good enough to get you through that first hurdle. I mean, those entitlements processes, those building permit processes are extremely lengthy, right? Sometimes it's just about getting the deliverable out there and then continuing to iterate as you go.
What was one particular thing I wanted to maybe just, if you could just clarify, because there's one of your graphs which I find intriguing, to do with the way in which architect salaries have dipped. And maybe you could just go flick back to that one, just so we can see that, because I think when you're presenting it, sometimes it is not so clear that what you've done is actually, that is your graph, and you're interpreting this one here. You've interpolated it based on data from someone else. Could you maybe just say exactly what was the data, and how did you translate it into this particular graph?
Of course. So this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics data. It comes out quite raw. You have different Excels. They also have their own kind of mapping on their website. But what's interesting is that I started kind of pulling these comparisons of the companies that are relative to each other. So you have architectural services, but zooming into the engineering services that are from the AEC industry, I think is significant, because those are our direct partners. And this is just a side-by-side comparison of these two graphs right next to each other to show, this is a kind of very pure extraction from there, just to map it out, to see the relationship between the two visually, between the engineering services and the architectural. The one prior, I've overlaid 4 different sets of metrics that is showing the difference between the kind of output per worker, meaning the productivity, the revenue generated, compared to the hours worked. So you can see that there's a real jumps that can be identified and noticed. I mean, if you look back, before kind of BIM and CAD, that kind of integration, there was a much greater hours per worker for architectural services. I mean, even this gap is really notable that we have these much more hours worked, and then you see the revenue is significantly lower, and then we have this kind of jump that's occurring. So it's really impactful to see that. Sorry, Neil, you're muted.
Yeah, yes, I guess the challenge is that you it's kind of a bigger question about the cultural capital of the architect seems to have plummeted in some senses. As soon as the general public think, well, we don't need to pay them so much. It's you're kind of you're swimming against the stream when you're trying to justify your value. So I think you're right to home in on that question of value, but I think it's also going to be extremely challenging to reverse the flow in some senses.
Certainly. Well, I think this is our real opportunity here because of the fact, it's an opportunity, but it's a necessary challenge where right now there's so much disruption. There's already language being output regarding AI, but still it's unknown, and still it's unknown how we want to do this. This is our moment right now to take that disruption, to take the unknown while people are talking about it and say, let's reset the expectations here and say, okay, now that we have this, it's revolutionary, it's completely adjusting the way that we have to work. Let's say, this is our moment. This is actually what we do. I'm actually working on a marketing presentation that is a kind of market penetration deck, if you will, where we were sort of tasked and asked to let's go talk about what we do with AI to our clients. And my argument is, well, we're talking about what we're doing with AI almost as a Trojan horse. It seems of interest, but what we're talking about is what we actually do. What is it that we're already doing, and that's so good and that's so impactful and worthwhile. But then AI is just helping us do it even better, right? So we have to reset the way that we talk about ourselves. And, arguably, the quicker we can get to resetting the way that we even deal with our contracts and fees, the better off we will be, because otherwise frankly, we might be in a little bit of trouble here.
Yeah. So there are a few questions in the chat. One particularly for you. So let's maybe start with that one, and the other ones came in before. We unfortunately didn't relay it in time when well, Tim and Marianne had no time really to answer them. But let's try and look at them as well. But first of all, this last one in the chat, Lorena, based on Mariana's and Tim's studios as examples of successful AI practices, and in your presentation, do you see big firms absorbing smaller ones through client retention, or small firms gaining the chance to deliver and compete as fast as the big firms? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I find it interesting because I don't think, there are some companies, if I were to go, I don't want to flip back too far. Sorry, I'm going to come back to this graph right here. If you were to look at these kind of top 10 firms, across across the world, and the different revenues that are there, some of the firms that are here do grow based off of acquisition almost exclusively. And they would go and find a market that they think is great for them, valuable, and they would do so. I've seen some of these firms may even go and say, yes, we need more visualizations. There seems to be a demand on that. This company is doing great AI visualizations. They've got a team, and they buy out the whole team, right? That does happen. There are other firms, I can tell you, Gensler does not grow through acquisition whatsoever. They have never, not once out of the 56 offices that are there, purchased out entirety of another company. It's dependent on the culture of the company, but they are, also see the idea of having control and security on the quality of the work that they're doing. So they as a company don't do that. Now, what I think is really interesting is that these smaller companies are doing exceptional work, right? Exceptional, beautiful work, beautiful designs, a level of customization, and there is no denying that the quality and the design work that can come out of there is beautiful, and the fees will not necessarily be truly comparable, right? Their fees will be significantly lower just because of the magnitude of the work. So I think it's a conversation now about differentiation. It's about really clearly defining what it is that you get with working with one company that is like that versus a larger company. The larger company may be able to give you, if they're feeding off of their own data, more reliable data based off of their own buildings. They're creating proprietary softwares that will allow them to generate work that is based off of their kind of own past standards, which if you're looking for a reputation, credibility, and so forth, you might want to work with that larger company. And there may be an idea of longevity here where it's also refining to the client the fact that maybe this larger company, because they have a lot of different facets, they may be able to offer a turnkey service, meaning they go from concept design all the way to the end of the work. Or maybe at some points, I mean, it does happen, firms like this, Gensler and the like, become, executive architects for another design's vision. So it's about differentiation. But I think as much as what we can do to be transparent about what we do, and clear about how we're unique to that particular client's offerings, I think there's an opportunity for all of us to be thriving, less so than just being absorbed, or jobs taken away. It's, clarity, not confusion.
Yeah. Just one thing on this graph, I think it'd be useful if you were to you've put in the revenue per capita just for Gensler. I think it'd be very interesting to see the revenue
Yes.
per capita for each of those firms.
Absolutely. That's going to be the next kind of expansion of this chart and graph. It's just interesting because that particular 500,000, is from anecdotally, I did a couple of studies, not the capita, the amount of employees at the time for all the firms weren't necessarily readily available, but I'm trying to find that information. I was just able to access the Gensler revenue a little, the employees at the time a little bit more easily.
Yeah, I was interested just in your comment about how some firms acquire other firms.
Mhm.
It kind of reminded me of it when I was doing my early research. The first edition of my book, I asked someone from Autodesk, I said, can you tell me what innovation, as AI innovations come out of Autodesk recently? And he said, Autodesk innovation? No, no, no. Autodesk acquires, they buy up, so
It's
Space
true.
became former and so on.
That's
So
very
there are
true.
two different logics in the marketplace for sure.
Yes, and we have seen, I mean, not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but there are times where Autodesk would acquire, and then some of those products that were out there previously are simply no longer there. So once they make that acquisition, they can determine, whether they want to continue that service in the market, or if they maybe even see it as a competitor to themselves, they can make that, it's at their discretion because they've purchased that product or service. So.
Yeah. So there is another question for you in the chat. Lorena, do you see bigger companies being able to adapt to AI as it moves so swiftly? I want our company to adapt more, but it's hard to turn a ship. How is Gensler approaching it how is Gensler approaching it in terms of the approval process? Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's very true, right? The larger the company, the more secure it needs to be because you have so many clients that you're protecting the data from. You have your own information. The amount of employees at the moment, Gensler is almost four or 5,000. So it's a real challenge. However, there are opportunities with these enterprise solutions that are out there, including Run Diffusion has enterprise solutions. Uh, Stable Diffusion has enterprise solutions. And so these larger companies are basically starting to create these connections where some of those typically open source models are hosted directly onto their servers. So it is an investment that gets made, but once it is, it impacts. It may take a little bit longer than a smaller company that can just go and without those concerns just pay for a subscription. But when it does happen, it's truly affecting every single project. So we've seen these kind of moments of innovation that come out in waves. We also have select teams that are given like privileged access basically earlier on as a sort of sandbox. They test use cases, they test the kind of level of implementation. So you might even think of it in the big scheme of a huge corporate firm, there's a number, 10, 15 that act as almost its mini studio, pushing the boundaries, much the same as some of the presentations you've seen earlier today. Um,
Let's quickly just go through some of the questions. There's one this is coming in, which from Wes, which actually we can't really answer. Can you please share some of the educational qualifications for applying for MC Studio and Studio Tim Fu? No, we can't because unfortunately they have had to rush off. But I guess you just try. I mean, it does seem to get a degree from the AA might help in that regard. So let's Oh, oh, hold on a second. There's okay. One above. How do you leverage AI to manage the trade-off between quantity and quality, design refinement, client satisfaction in product and service design? That was actually for Tim Fu and Marianne. I don't know if you want to have any comments. Would you have any comments on that one?
Oh, sure. I think, well, they may have been referring to, I'm going to flip to this one slide, which was more about this kind of highlighting of the different value factors that are here. And in terms of how to kind of compare the two. What's interesting is that this really comes down to what the architectural workflow is within the company itself. So you may say, a metric of quality, if you were to think of a sliding scale, a client may say, well, I'm totally fine. I want the quality to be very quick. I want a quick sketch, right? In that case, there's more of an opportunity for AI impact to create that quick sketch if that's their expectation. Or if they want something much more bespoke, then you're going into a level of, 3D modeling and making every single detail completely unique. Similarly to speed, if the expectation of speed is high, you have a greater impact of AI in that kind of component versus if you want a kind of level of a higher level of customization. At that point, the quality is taking precedent. But in the customization component, I find it really interesting because in that and reliability as well, but in customization, on one extreme, you may say, I want a completely optimized single solution of like a unit type, for example, or a typology that could then be repeated all throughout the building. So you could have a building stack of 10 different units this exact way, and they all kind of iterate upon each other, but that it is optimizing for a certain kind of product. That is actually the opposite of customization. It's standardization. There's an opportunity for AI to be also helping with that standardization. But then on the other extreme of customization, if you want hyper customization, there's also opportunities to create even more design optionality of AI being able to generate more vignettes, more studies, and so on. So that actually helps with the level of being very bespoke too. And then in the case of reliability, there are tools out there that are coming through of quality assurance checks. So it's allowing AI to go through and back check the work that we're doing. I mean, even on a very simple basis, if you're using AI to even back check your own submittal reviews, that already can help so much with reliability. You have these huge documents, you have your construction, you're making these comparisons, and you're saying, this is my analysis, but you tell me, am I missing something here? And so that it's a level of kind of back checking yourself. So it can help on all of those different points. But if you notice the way that I described it, there was not a one size fits all solution of, well, AI is going to help with customization like this. It totally depends on what the client is looking for in those respects. Sorry, Emil, you're muted.
Sorry, yes. There's one here for you, actually. I missed this one. Dear Lorena, thanks, Lorena. How do you balance quantitative performance measures with qualitative? Sorry, let me start again. How do you balance quantitative performance measures with qualitative design values in AI-assisted architecture?
So what's interesting is the client, this is where you start to have that kind of human critical thinking. And these are people in the end of the day. These are people, and there's a sort of soft skills component to some of this. So that qualitative design measure of whether the client's satisfied, what they're looking for, their needs met, there is a sort of soft skill to that of saying, is there a trust here that you believe, that this is what they're asking for? And sometimes there's a component of clients are asking you for one thing, but they don't truly know what they're looking for, right? So you need to kind of walk them through it and what your perception of is. So that area will be a little bit kind of nebulous, and that's why I do attempt in my research and findings to suggest that we start speaking to our clients using certain definable factors to say, have we met your expectations on the quality that you met? Let's predefine it. Let's talk about what it is that you were expecting for that. What is it that you expect from speed and customization? That takes away some of those nebulous components. There will always be that. There will always be that kind of soft skill component. But when we talk about it in different predefined ways, it really helps level set the fact that the answer is not going to be, well, I created 3 design options for you. You picked B, right? That shouldn't be our kind of response. Our response should be, we adapted to what your needs were over time. At the beginning, you told us these things was what you were looking for. At the end, it was these things, and our project is successful because we've hit that specific level of quality, speed, customization, and that reliability that you were looking for. Now, sometimes that's not a true qualitative, that's a supporting role that creates a little bit more rigor. If we say that it's true qualitative, that's where I start getting into the financials, right? Where it's like, well, then the contract comes into play where we start saying, well, how can we be defining the worth of what we do into real measurable outcomes? And so like I mentioned before, we aren't there yet because in many cases, because our contracts aren't established in such a way where we're seeing that, right? Where we're seeing that kind of partnership. Because let's say in comparison, if you were in a typical design bid build process, you would have your architectural drawings. You hope that you did a great quality of drawing such that you don't have a lot of requests for information, RFIs, or issues that come up in the field, and you have a contractor. Well, the challenge is we're also dependent on the contractor's ability to review our drawings, their skill set. But if, let's say, we produced an incredible set of drawings, we had and it's super clear, contractor is fine, right? They're fine, they're able to read it. They don't, add significant importance, or they don't necessarily diminish the quality of the work. That incredible set of documents that we have, we're not really seeing the real outcome of it, right? So we're having to market ourselves in advance saying, you're likely going to have a great set of drawings from us, but not a guarantee, right? And there's no real reward for achieving that kind of guarantee. So it's an interesting kind of balance to solve. I hope I answered your question in the difference between the two. The qualitative we can speak to, or the qualitative we can speak to with this a bit more rigor, but the quantitative will have to wait for a little bit more of the financials.
Okay, and just finally, there's one here which maybe you just want to comment on briefly. Again, it was well, actually, it could be answered by anybody. I've spoken with architects who don't want AI touching design, only they only want it for visualization, but they do want it in documentation, compliance, budgeting, and management.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because it's challenging when you say visualization. What that typically means is I've created a kind of fully rendered 3-dimensional output, and here we are, we've hit a button, AI has now rendered it per se, right? That's what might say is that kind of visualization if you're not touching design. Now, the challenge with that is that you might not be getting the best of the iterative process that could happen with AI, right? Where you're able to see all of these different optionalities. It's sort of where the building is still flexible, and you do lose a little bit of time there. But what I appreciated a lot with some of Mariana's presentation is she was also highlighting the fact that that part of the process, it's so small in comparison to everything else that we're doing. So understandably, that's what we're all hoping for, is to have a higher level of intervention earlier on in those stages. If I were to kind of flip back to my slide here interventions of AI in that. I mean, we might know that the image and drawing generation, at least what I've kind of outlined, is a small step, but even in any architectural firm, there's still a lot of technical work that's done. There's still a lot of client-facing work that's done. There's so much that AI could be kind of helping us move forward. That's not just about the drawings and the design itself. I actually, I mean, optimistically, altruistically, I would hope that the minimization of some of this other work will allow us for some more time to design. But in order to do so, we actually have to be very good at communicating what design is and why it's worthwhile.
Thank you, Lorena. This has been, I mean, actually, I want to thank also Tim and Mariana, because together this has been a really interesting session because we're seeing the problem from two different perspectives. And so useful, I think, for all architects and all architecture students out there to go and see this laid down. And I think your project, especially, I think it needs to be disseminated in some way. I wish the AIA would invite you to talk about these things at their conferences, and I wish, well, I'm sure they will now. And I think we need to get this book out, which is, this is the thing. It's actually very, very relevant. And I think what your real skill is, Lorena, it's actually interpolating and looking at beyond the statistics, actually visualizing the graphs out of the thing. And some of those outcomes are truly astonishing and really quite striking, and nobody's done it before. And so that's what I want to focus on. I want to just say, for those who don't have come across this work for the first time, I've seen it a few times now, and that's what I'm highlighting. I think it's amazing that you're visualizing all these issues, particularly the collapse in the salary of the architects. I think that's really astonishing work. So anyway, to be continued. Thanks, Lorena.
Thank you very much, Neil, and I mean, and for all your guidance throughout this process. I mean, I'm very lucky to have you as an advisor through the work.
Yeah, well, you're a great advertisement for our DDES. Anyway, I also want to thank Mitra and the rest of the team, Giovanna and Bavleen and things, who are putting together all this sort of promotional material and live streaming and things. I want to stress this, that Digital Futures is like an iceberg. You might see me, but actually there's a 90% of it is a bit like is below the surface, and we don't see it. But it happens, and I think this is a wonderful contribution. I'm at a conference now on AI in Boston. Everyone's saying thank you to me for Digital Futures. I should be passing that on to the entire team because it is a team effort. But fantastic. So tomorrow, I should just mention we have Catherine Hales for our doctoral consortium session. She has published a book, Bacteria to AI, that is incredibly interesting, and she's going to be talking about that book tomorrow. Now, next Saturday, we wrap up this particular Saturday series with a session of tutorials on AI tools for the office with XCool, LookX, and infrared. That should be super useful. And to be continued. Thank you so much for everybody, not just today, but in the previous sessions. One more session to go. Let's see it through. And thank you, Lorena, especially for today. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.